Okay, so today we're covering 6-3, which we're going to do the bottom part of these notes here. Before we do that, I'm going to have you take a look at this quadrilateral family tree. All these shapes are interconnected, quadrilateral being like the great-grandpa. The quadrilateral had 3 babies, called them trapezoid, parallelogram, and kite. These are all quadrilaterals as well. Then trapezoid had a baby called isosceles trapezoid, which is also a trapezoid, but these two sides are the same length. And we'll go more into depth about trapezoids in a later lesson. Parallelograms is where we're focusing today, and we focused yesterday. So a parallelogram, by definition, has 2 pairs of parallel lines. And so we'll zoom in here. So that means that...
Are you sure you're not recording?
Oh, it is.
It is?
Yes. Thank you for checking, though. I appreciate it. So the opposite sides are parallel, like this, and this side is parallel to this over here. Here's the thing. All 3 of these shapes are also parallelograms, so all the rules of parallelograms also apply to these shapes. A rectangle is a parallelogram. The opposite sides are parallel. But a rectangle also has 90-degree angles in each corner. But just like a parallelogram, opposite sides are congruent and all of that. Rhombus is another baby of the parallelogram. Its opposite sides are parallel as well. But a rhombus has all sides congruent. So it's like a square in that sense, but it doesn't have the 90-degree angles of a square. And again, we'll go more into depth with rhombuses in another lesson, but just an overview. And then rhombus and rectangle had an incestual baby, and they called it a square. A square has all sides congruent. It has all opposite sides parallel, and it also has the 90-degree angles. So this diagram will also help you with those Khan Academy lessons where you had to differentiate the shapes. All of these are actually parallelograms, and that's where people get confused. Okay, so moving down here to the second part of the lesson we did yesterday. Yesterday we talked about the properties of a parallelogram. So if you have a parallelogram, opposite sides are congruent. Today we're saying, okay, if opposite sides are congruent, then you have a parallelogram, so it flips it. So for number 5, we're going to write down if both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. And of course, we're going to use our abbreviations. Both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. Then the quadrilateral, abbreviated as quad, is a parallelogram. So this side is congruent to this one, and this is congruent to this. Then you have a parallelogram, which could also be a square or a rectangle or a rhombus. Six is if both pairs of opposite angles are congruent, you have a parallelogram. If both pairs of opposite angles are congruent, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. And this looks like this. So tomorrow I will not be here, but you're going to cover the next lesson on rectangles. I'm going to record just like I am now, and you'll watch the recording in class. So you won't have access to the computer, so make sure that your phone's charged and that you have headphones for your phone, so that way you can do it on your phone. And if you're not here, you can do it remotely, of course. Okay, so if your opposite angles are congruent, then you have a parallelogram.
Then can I go to 413 tomorrow?
Yes, you can. Okay, if diagonals bisect each other, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So just like we saw yesterday, the diagonals here, they aren't the same length, but they intersect at their midpoint. So this would be the same as this side, and this would be the same as this one. And then the last one, 8 is new. We didn't go over it yesterday. If one pair of opposite sides is congruent and parallel, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. If one pair of opposite sides is congruent and parallel, then the quad is a parallelogram. Remember, that symbol right there means parallel. And what that looks like is if you have one set of opposite sides that are congruent, meaning they're the same length, and those sides are also parallel, then you can prove it's a parallelogram. And then once you're done copying that down, we're going to transition over to the workbook for 6-3.